Uh,
I'm just going to share the YouTube because that's the one where we get interaction, live interaction
Right.
with people.
All right. And let's see. We're having a bit of a slow start here. There we go. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moskowitz. Welcome to the program, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight, with Friday being a repeat program. You're welcome to join the program. We are live and we are getting chats on both YouTube and Rumble, when Rumble being the flagship of the station, by the way. And also, we take calls here. I've been getting a few calls, and you're welcome to call in 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. David, you're getting very professional. Your camera looks much better, and it looks like you're doing some work on the the looks of the show.
Yeah, I might even invest some more money into streaming. As I don't think I'll ever make it as a business, but yeah, I like communicating with people and talking about this stuff. It's pretty important, so might put some more money into it.
Well, what's so look, obviously the we are in a fog of war right now in Ukraine, and the latest news that I've seen is that apparently, according to news, and I don't know what to believe, but you can never tell, but it's they're saying that Russia has hit a nuclear plant inside of Ukraine, and that radioactivity is escaping from the plant. That is not good news for the world. I mean, this is, it's like a hair trigger away from world war. Let's be honest. I mean, that's where the world is right now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think so. I don't. I mean, I don't think the cavalry's coming. I don't think you say. I think it's going to be limited to basically just Russia and Ukraine, and it's just talk. So at the end of the day, like I did a lot of research, but it's like no, I mean, it doesn't appear that there's going to be any form of escalation from any. God forbid. I'll give some details, but it would appear that basically, Russia is really just destroying, Ukraine. Ukraine stands no chance in this war. It even looks pretty bad, just looking at, Zelensky. I mean, he really looks incompetent, and from what I saw, he's probably just in a bunker doing interviews with Western and Israeli media, sending out tweets. Saying like I mean, he's really just an actor. He's being portrayed as this, modern day Churchill, but like in reality, he's no warrior. He's in a bunker. He's just sitting there giving interviews, sending out tweets, probably scared for his life, and has no idea what he's doing. He's not on the front line. There's no coordinated defense from Ukraine, and Russia is probably going to take the whole of Ukraine, and so I did a lot of work to understand the Russian side, the narrative from our side, the U.S. side is pretty monolithic. Even the Republicans, even like Fox News and mainstream right wing, it's kind of coming together. God forbid Biden's President Biden's State of the Union. I don't know if it was just the Democrats chanting USA and siding with Ukraine, but it would appear it's all going to amount to nothing. It's just going to be, and the Zelensky is incompetent, like encouraging Ukrainians to fight, and like God forbid, it reminds of World War II, where the Russians, sent people off with one gun for two people, and just said you'll take the guns off the dead bodies, and say like kind of a madman. Zelensky's just telling Ukrainians to fight with Molotov cocktails against really one of the most powerful armies in the world,
Right.
and just giving machine guns out to random people on the street with no military training. I mean, that sounds like incompetency of the highest order, and like God forbid, counter-Semitic people, they're making claims about things in the past, but just like kind of reckless disregard for Ukrainian life. you encourage civilians to fight with no military experience and just say like, try to fight the best army in the, second best army in the world with Molotov cocktails?
No, I mean, I think you've sized it up quite well. I mean, it's it's a hopeless situation. I think Americans generally, we tend to side with the underdog, and that it is not a nice thing to watch a sovereign generally we tend to be attacked and to lose its sovereignty. And I think we all support the principle of sovereignty. That the Ukrainians, I think, have shown that they have a strong nationalism, that they're not rolling over so easily. But you're right. I mean, they can't hope to take on Mother Russia. I mean, Russia is a nuclear power. And I think that the Biden administration actually, and I'd have to say grudgingly, deserves some credit so far for understanding that the United States should not enter into a nuclear war with Russia. That, they're putting in moderate sanctions. And even then, they're not really putting in sanctions. They're still trading with oil. And, they talked about shutting down Russia's banking system, and then they backed down from doing that. And that it's just not a situation that's, I mean, you have both the far left and the far right saying the same thing, that basically on the left, they're saying, oh, well, Putin is really like Hitler and he wants to conquer Europe and he has this utopian vision of conquering ultimately the world. And then on the right, you have the same thing, except they say that Putin is secretly a communist. The Golitsyn theory, new lies for old. Anatoly Golitsyn was defected to the United States in the late 70s, and he wrote a book where he said that the Russians will change their names and they'll throw out the word communism and they'll suddenly become like, Western, but they'll do the same thing and they really are secretly communist and they still have the same ambitions. I don't think that either of those things are true. I think that Putin is a Russian nationalist, and I think he's a Russian Orthodox Christian. And he does have this image, which I reject, and I think it's wrong. But we're just talking about what's going on there, that Russia has this kind of divine mission in the world, and that it's a holy state, and that he wants to see Russia established on the same lines as the Romanov dynasty. I mean, I think that in a way, it's almost slightly Zionistic, whereas as Jews, we see Israel, this tiny swath of land, as having both a religious and spiritual as well as a nationalist aspect to it. It's not just an ordinary country. And that's where he is. But unfortunately, the idea of the greater Russia, the holy Russia, includes Ukraine, and it includes Belarus. I don't think it includes much more than that. And I don't think that Putin is dumb enough to try to take on Poland, because if he does, the Poles will drop a bomb on the Kremlin in about 5 minutes. That's not going to happen. I think that Eastern Europe is very strong. But Ukraine is a border, the word Ukraine means borderlands, and it's always been in dispute. I honestly don't think that the United States has an interest there. And I think that the United States and our oligarchs, including the present president and his business dealings with Burisma, and the Western leaders and a certain Hungarian billionaire, who we're not going to mention his name, I think they had an interest in Ukraine. And, for financially and also politically. And I think that they might have had a hand in instigating a coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014, which removed the elected government that was pro-Russian and tried to then move Ukraine into the orbit of NATO. Now, when Ukraine became independent and when Ukraine gave up their nuclear bombs, they agreed that they would not join NATO and that they would not join the European Union. And I think that's a reasonable thing to expect. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I hope that if they're having these negotiations, hopefully Ukraine will back down and agree that they're not going to join NATO and the EU, and that they're going to be neutral with Russia, which is the same position that Finland takes and that the other former Soviet states take. and that they're not going to be getting wrapped up in these intrigues where they're being controlled by Western interests. Anyways, what say
Yeah,
you?
man, well, unfortunately, I mean, people, these issues are complicated and people, cognitively can only understand it through the knowledge that we have. And, rather than just learn a whole bunch of new information, people have to work with the paradigms of understanding that we already have.
Right.
So just, what is the Russian perspective? We talked the last few weeks and I said like moralizing that I don't think it's productive to moralize and like good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains, or even to impugn motives. And basically, God forbid, I was just now calling my local synagogue with a professor of Russian studies, and I actually have one of his books, and it was almost all moralizing and impugning motives, and none of it corresponded with what the Russians actually say. And so to get to the facts, and the unfortunate reality is, can we actually know the facts? And generally I'll just completely avoid the moralizing. Not saying there aren't morals or the morals aren't important, but people could decide for themselves who the heroes and villains are. And in terms of motives, I'll talk in terms of interest, but in terms of like impugning motives, it's largely ridiculous, and probably most of those motives is attributed to Russia are mostly false. So unlike President Biden and Zelensky, Lavrov did like a whole hour international press conference taking questions. Even George Stephanopoulos got a question and he answered, and then kind of yelled at him, and then went to a Chinese reporter who asked a pro-Russian question. And Putin was on TV today doing a military ceremony for his fallen warriors. And so there's a lot of information coming from Russia that doesn't correspond to anything really that you just said. Like, according to at this point, it's too late. Ukraine is going to have a complete surrender, a complete demilitarization, kind of what the hard right in Israel wanted to do into Gaza. They wanted to go into Gaza and completely demilitarize it. So at this point, it looks like Russia is going to completely demilitarize the Ukraine, and there's probably nothing that could stop that.
Right.
And the more the Ukraine fights back, the more casualties. And it would appear that Russia is limiting civilian deaths. So, like, God forbid, it would seem that. So just to get the narrative, if it makes sense, that according to Russia, and I even listened to the Russian ambassador to Israel, spoke to Israel, and they're sticking to this denazification and claiming that Ukraine, funded by the West, possibly the CIA, has committed severe war crimes in the Donbass, or the region, that the separatist region. They claim that Ukraine has killed 20 to 50,000 Russians over the last 10 years, and the invasion has nothing to do with expansion or resetting up the empire. It has to do with the fact that 20 to 50,000 ethnic Russians have been killed over the last decade, largely funded by the West, possibly even Israel, giving weapons and saying, if you're calling them Nazis or not, and that the whole point of the attack is in defense of these people, and they have no intention of controlling Ukraine or setting up a puppet government. They just want to demilitarize it because no one is stopping Ukraine from the killing of these innocent Russian civilians. And if you listen to like the Western media, basically Putin's a madman who's just gone crazy and invading Ukraine, like you said, because he wants to reestablish Tsarist Russia, or he's mad because they're on decline or something like that. But according to them, that no, it's us who's committed the war crimes, and they've and that would put it into more. It's not like just Putin. It's the Russians. People know that so it's a factual question. Have there been 20 to 50,000 Russians killed in the last decade? What is our involvement as the U.S. and the Ukraine in this? And even the Russian ambassador to Israel in Israel said denazification, and the Israeli press asked him, like, what are you crazy? You're claiming that the Ukraine has a Jewish president and a Jewish
Right.
secretary of defense, that they're Nazis. The Russian said, that's the most classic line of, I have a Jewish friend, I can't be an anti-Semite. Like Adam Green's friends with Duvid, he can't be an anti-Semite.
Ah,
And so, the
no,
um,
that's interesting.
so I mean, Russia, all of these people, in the UN, all of the Russian speeches stuck to the story that these guys are neo-Nazis. They're killing Ukraine, they're killing Russians, and that's the whole reason they're doing it.
Okay. No, I mean, I think both things can be true. I don't think Russia would be trying to create a mother Russia and a holy Russia if Ukraine was pacified, or if at least they were not, making alliances with Russia's enemies. I mean, the idea that Ukraine would join NATO, that would
It's
be like,
disputed territory. I mean, saying that
well, that's right,
the
but that would,
Russia's, they've kind of broken off, and they need fighters on their behalf. And so the only people really willing to fight the Russians in a majority ethnic area that doesn't like them that much were neo-Nazis. So they armed neo-Nazis.
well, I've heard this, but the thing is that,
That
Ukraine.
seems pretty factual. Like, I mean, I
No,
know
I
people say
understand
that
the
that's
Azov
ridiculous.
Brigade, yeah, that they are neo-Nazis, and that, look, I mean, by joining NATO, that would be like if Mexico joined China and China set up military troops on our southern border. So I understand Russia's position, but yes, I think what you're saying may also be true. We don't know that the Ukrainians, especially as they're kind of influenced by, if not controlled by, these Western influence interests, people who are like profiting from Burisma oil, for example. We're not going to mention who. I think most listeners to this program know who. And this Hungarian billionaire and globalists, that if they're really controlling Ukraine, then that's not good news for Russia, and it's probably not good news for the Ukrainian people. But I think that where Putin seemed to have miscalculated is that he believed that he would get support from the Ukrainians when he went in, and he hasn't. The Ukrainians are not accepting the
That's
Russian
unclear
occupation.
also. I mean, we'll talk about that more, but that's unclear. And, I did see sources that basically, Ukraine wants to surrender, and it's really the last prop of we'll call a puppet, Zelensky presidency in the West, to make it look like but to say that that's propaganda and it's unknown. It could be that factually the majority of the Ukrainians do actually want to surrender, and that's just propaganda that they're saying in terms of the fighting in the various things. So it's hard to know that information.
It's hard to know what to believe in the Western media, especially since, not to get into a subject, but the way things went down for the last election, it really has made me really distrustful of the Western media. So I don't know what to believe in
You
that.
really think that, I mean, you said there's a certain element in terms of, like, God forbid, like if Zelensky, and it's really us, saying, like, like I mentioned in the last few weeks, like, okay, I'm a Jew. I spent my whole adult life, in service of Israel and greater Jewish causes. But I have moral questions of whether I'm on the right side. I don't have the question what side I'm on. I'm obviously on the side of Israel, but when I go to sleep at night or when I think about it, I'm not so sure we're right. And it's kind of the same thing looking at here what's going on.
Right. Well,
And
neither
saying,
am
like,
I.
I
I
don't
mean,
have any connection to Russia.
when it
I'm a
comes to
Ukrainian Jew. My
policy,
ancestors even came from the Ukraine. I was mentioning before the show started.
as did
Rabbi
mine.
Moskowitz
Yeah,
just got.
oh yeah, my ancestors came from Ukraine, as did my wife's. But the
But I'm
thing
just
is, that I
questioning.
also understand, David, that there are moral questions in support of Israel and even in support of the United States. I mean, it's a very complicated thing, and such support should never be blind. But as far as Ukraine goes, I mean, Zelensky strikes me as being somewhat of a nut. I mean, it's almost like the movie. Are you familiar with the movie Zelig with Peter Sellers? He
I'm not. Is that the Woody Allen Zelig or?
no. Peter Sellers walks through life basically taking on these personas as an actor, and he actually lives it to the point where at the end of the movie he's like walking on water, and it's like he becomes president of the United States, and he just it's a strange movie. And this guy Zelensky was an actor, and a comedian, by the way, a very vulgar comedian, I may add, who was playing piano with his penis in one skit, but he also played president of the Ukraine in a movie. And now all of a sudden they're calling him up and saying, well, why not become president of Ukraine? And I think that there might be a possibility, and we don't know what he's really like, but that he has this kind of narcissistic, megalomaniacal personality that's feeding on this superhero treatment he's getting. All of a sudden, people are crying and saying when he appears at the UN by video, and he's making a movie, and he's, in a way, it's like there's a very good possibility that he might be insane, and that he's willing to take his whole country into a nuclear war to prop up this, delusional image that he might have of himself. Now, I know
Well, it is all just a delusion. I mean, the Ukrainian army has basically already been defeated. There's little holdouts.
right.
And, so really all Zelensky could do is claim that the Ukrainian people want to die rather than surrender to Russia. And he's using, he's really just sitting in a bunker. He's not a military leader. He's not, has no understanding or command of the Ukrainian military. And he's just sitting in a bunker talking to Western
Okay.
media about how the
At the same
Ukrainian
time, I
people
mean,
are willing to
every
fight
day
and
that
die. And
this
it's
thing goes
possible the
on.
Ukrainian people are willing to fight and die. But it's God forbid it's just completely incompetent for the president of the country to be telling people to
Oh, yeah.
fight with Molotov cocktail. Like, it's a losing battle.
It's
At this point,
suicidal, and it's
Ukraine has zero chance of uh, winning this. Even if
although at the same
even
time,
if the
David,
West
you
even if
would
the
have
West
thought that
were to
Russia
give
could have.
weapons, and look at Israel, we'll talk about Israel in this, but Israel refused to give weapons. Zelensky is on the media, complaining that Jews aren't helping him, and he's complaining that he expects Israel to do more for him.
Well,
And
actually, Western Europe is sending a huge amount of heavy weapons, and they're sending, I mean, I think that they're sending like missiles and Javelin missiles and everything else.
yeah, I mean, God forbid, that's why this thing's not over. So I mean,
Well, and I think it's not every day
that
that
Russia
it's
is
not
being
over.
extremely difficult to avoid, careful to avoid civilian casualties, and
Yeah, but
so the
David,
only
every
thing
day
that's
that
keeping
it's
us
not
going is the
over
weapons.
could be dangerous for Putin and could be dangerous for Russia. At least
I don't
that's
see
what I'm
any
hearing.
danger for Putin in this. I mean, that's just like some
Really?
Western bubble.
Okay. That could be. Is that
What possible danger could there be in this
I
for
can tell
Putin?
you what danger there could be. The fact that Putin has called for a heightened alert nuclear wise, and the fact that he has not yet subdued Ukraine, and that could turn out to be a slow situation, and that there are boycotts building all over the world. The propaganda war is being won by Ukraine. That Putin could end up, it's like at the end of World War I, when the Kaiser Wilhelm, the generals knocked on the door and they said, dear Mr. Kaiser, with due respect, you have to leave. You have 24 hours to get out of the country and get your family out, or else you're going to, or else. And, that could happen with Putin.
It's possible, but I don't think there's really going to be any military backlash against what's happening there. And if you say it's really just like like Hillary, it's a bunch of media people saying like you're a bad man, and
I don't know what to believe.
there's not really any danger to Putin for what's going on. Like I was watching in all the media and saying like like the boycott and like just look at Israel, saying like people have been saying that about Israel for decades now. And you had the UN vote. I mean, ironically, now Russia is heading the Security Council, but militarily, all the nations have said that they're not going to get involved militarily. The most they're going to do is send weapons. So the question of the
I don't think anybody's going to commit troops, and I think that look.
Let me put it, what danger is there to Putin? Like you're claiming that like the Russians. I mean the question, is it a popular war? Is this generally Russian sentiment? Is it factual that if you're in Russia, that Ukraine has been killing thousands of Russians yearly for a decade now? And
And if that's true, then I think that the Russia should make that known.
well, they are. I'm saying I watched their conference that said Lavrov did an international press conference for like an hour. Unlike Biden, uh, the Russians are out there talking to people. Putin is like famous for his 5 hour. He's on TV every single day for like hours, and even in Israel, the Russian minister made himself available
Mhm.
for questionings. It's and that it's our media, it's Biden and our media that don't take questions.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I don't want
And
to.
they don't even let us see this. Like you have to go to the dark places, the internet,
Well,
just
of
to see
course,
it.
that's,
But I mean, the
yeah.
factually is that no, the Russians are out there saying their story. Like the Russian, Lavrov spoke to the UN yesterday, and everybody walked out, and then he yelled at people for like an hour. But it's saying like no, I mean, the Russians have said this. And
Hmm.
it's just kind of crazy that our media is basically just saying that's all lies, and it doesn't matter. That's not really why Russians doing why they're doing. They're doing it because these other reasons. And so I just listened to what the Russians said, and it's very hard to know. And some of the like I've heard about this for decades. It said like people have been complaining about Netanyahu and the Israeli right for like because we've been arming these Ukraine for a decade, and even the Nazis, the supposed Nazis in that region, that's been known for 10 years. And even the questions of the human rights abuses and war crimes, and the likelihood of maybe it is our government, the CIA, that's doing it. Maybe maybe the coup in Ukraine, and Zelensky is really a CIA puppet,
Mhm.
and that's the information. That's why we can't listen to what Russia's saying, because that's what Russia's saying.
Well, I mean, if what Russia's saying is true, and that the Zelensky government and every government since the coup is basically a kind of like a deep state operation from the United States and from the West, then a defeat of Ukraine is a major defeat for this entire internationalist, globalist, illuminated establishment. It really, it's sort of sets it back on its heels. It blows up the UN, it blows up NATO, it blows up the European Union, it blows up the globalist agenda because
Not
Russia.
really. I mean, it's a bubble that everyone knew was a bubble, and just it's saying it's a demilitarization. It'd just be
I'm
like if
saying, I'm
Israel
saying if
actually
Russia
went in
wins.
and demilitarized, Gaza. That as of now, it looks like, yeah, I would say high 90% chance Russia will completely demilitarize the Ukraine. What happens to Ukraine after? We could speculate on that or go
Whatever,
over the
but the thing is, what
possibilities.
I'm saying
But
is
at
that,
this point,
if
that's
what you're
almost a
saying is
given.
right, and I think it very well is probably is right, then that is a major defeat for the Western internationalist order.
No, I mean, so we just sold them weapons and it didn't work, and say
Right.
it didn't really change
And
the
it
order.
also
And so
is an
you just
it's a
militarized the
victory
Ukraine,
for,
and then Russia demilitarized them. It's just like going
well,
into
but it's
Gaza.
also a victory for Russian nationalism because I think that Russia does not want to have Western influence right at the heart of their country. I mean, let's not forget
The
Ukraine has
influence
a
was an
1,000
illusion,
mile border
anyways.
with
Like no one in their right mind thought. I mean, I've been telling you this for the whole time we've been talking, that influence was an illusion the whole time.
What do you mean influence by the West?
The power, like the US or like Trump would have been able to do something about it. No,
Well,
he
I'm not
wouldn't
saying I
have.
didn't get
The,
into
the,
that.
the power was the power wasn't really there in the first place. Only morons who in the media or propagandists actually thought that power existed. And
Well, they
the
were
rest of
trying
the
to
world.
assert that power and they failed because Ukraine,
I
because
mean, that's
Russia.
your assertion. Like, oh, Trump would have asserted that power, and the people
No, I
would have
didn't say that.
respected that.
I never
And
said
like,
that.
no, no,
I
I mean
don't,
that power didn't
I think
exist.
that Trump would have probably had a little bit more of a bargaining chip with Putin. There's a reason why he didn't do it when Trump was in office. But I don't know if Trump would have gone to war for Ukraine. I doubt it. And maybe there would have been some kind of a bargaining where probably Ukraine would have tilted to Russia. It would not have gotten involved with joining Western military alliances and
It's
the.
opposite. I mean, Trump that's what he got impeached for, was for threatening to withhold weapons from the Ukraine unless
Well,
the
first of
president
all, he,
helped out information on Biden. But I'm saying
well, let's,
Trump wasn't getting tough on Putin. He was getting tough on the Ukraine and saying that he wasn't going to give the Ukraine
no, no,
weapons.
no. Well, first of all, Biden also withheld aid from Ukraine unless they fired the special prosecutor who was investigating his son's deal with Burisma. That's actually on tape. He said it in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. I have a true
I
$1
mean,
billion.
I'm just saying that Trump
to
was
you.
more likely to get tough with Ukraine than Russia.
No, but Trump actually was supporting Ukraine. I mean, he did ship, he was only going to withhold the aid to the point of the deadline and then deliver it. He didn't actually withhold the aid. He just delayed it because he wanted the Ukrainians to clean up their act in terms of investigating American corruption in their country. And by the way, I'm sure, David, that you're looking at some of the same kind of dark internet stuff that I'm looking at, and I don't want to go into details here, but let's just suffice to
I was
say
looking at
that,
mainstream Russian stuff mostly.
no, but
No,
I
I
mean,
would say I was looking at mainstream Russian stuff, but that's like dark
well,
internet
maybe
stuff.
it's mainstream Russian stuff you're looking at, but the point is that, and I'm not going to get explicit here because we are on YouTube, but I'll just say that Ukraine has some major moral corruption going on right now, especially involving younger people. Why don't we leave it at that? According to various sources, and I'm not saying that any of this is true. This is what Russia's saying right now, that they are rescuing young people from various very unfortunate situations in Ukraine. That
Ukraine does not have a coordinated military or army. There is no coordinated military defense, and even if Germany's giving arms, it's largely haphazard. That saying that, I mean, it appears the president in his are in bunkers in Kiev, and so I mean there's a certain amount of resistance. Obviously, like your average Ukrainian probably doesn't want to surrender to Russia. Uh, it's possible that President Zelensky did have somewhat of a large base of support, although he was support because he was supposed to be able to bring good ties with Russia. And now he's coming out. It's tough to know whether the president has lost faith. I mean, he's declared martial law. They've made it illegal for Russian men to leave. I think they've possibly, like, going back to Tsarist Russia in the World War II, World War I, they might even be trying to mandatory make all Ukrainian men fight. And then, God forbid, like
Right.
they don't even have weapons or an army. Like, I mean, like those stories,
Well,
we know the
David,
World War II stories, like I told you, where they sent two Russians with one gun, mostly to die, and then they shot the ones that tried to
but
run.
David, I guess according to
Is
your
that what Ukraine
information,
is doing now? Is saying is really going to force
according to your
Ukrainians to fight
information,
Russia?
David, according to your information, is that actually working in Ukraine? Are people like, are they lining up young men and children even to fight for Mother Ukraine? I mean, without even any guns? Is that actually happening? Because Zelensky has said this. I mean, this is, we're going to get, everybody's going to get, grenades, and everybody, we're going to try to, we're asking for nuclear war. And, he's threatened, I think he actually, from the bunker, if you will, says that he signed a document joining NATO and joining the EU. I mean, is this working for them?
No, I'm saying, like, God forbid that they have people making Molotov cocktails. I mean, they're handing out machine guns on street corners, and you can't raise up an army last minute. The state of the Ukrainian army, I mean, there is a Ukrainian army. It would appear that they've largely already been defeated. So it's just
Well, it does look like they've collapsed in the southern part of Ukraine, as in that the Russians have taken the city of Kherson, which is at the mouth of the Dnieper River, and also they've taken the the nuclear plant there, Chernobyl. And from what I understand, the reason that Russia wanted to take Chernobyl is because there have been rumors that Ukraine was hiding nuclear bombs at that plant, because the plant does release radioactivity and those bombs wouldn't be detected by nuclear inspectors from space because they wouldn't notice it. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, but Russia seems to think it's true, which is why they've secured that area.
I mean, they don't realistically think that they're going to be able to even hold Kiev. I think the Ukrainians themselves
Right.
bombed the Ohm entrances into Kiev in order to slow down the Russians, and really all they've done in any of the areas is slow down the Russians and basically, God forbid, use civilian shields and throwing
Well, I
civilians
mean,
out in front
it's
of Russian tanks and saying we're cheering that on, like the brave Ukrainians,
no,
civilians standing in front of tanks. But really, that's all Ukraine is doing, is using civilian shields. And I mean, God forbid, it's a bad situation. Like militaristically, it's kind of like Israel and Gaza. That saying like the comparison that
Mhm.
the hardline right wanted to go in and demilitarize Gaza, but international pressure or just fear of the mass casualties that they didn't. But military-wise, it's probably similar. That it's just like Russia is just like Israel trying to demilitarize Gaza. There's nothing they could do to stop it besides
Well,
use
there's a little difference to it, only in that
civilian shields.
Gaza is very, very militarized, whereas the Ukrainians, according to what you're saying, are not. And as far as Kiev goes, I think that Kiev or Kiev, however they're pronouncing it,
I think the Russian pronunciation is Kiev, and that's why they're all
Kiev,
saying Kiev, is
Kiev,
that's like
okay.
Ukrainian
I
to
thought
say
it was just some,
it's not Kiev, it's
it's
Kiev.
Kiev. I mean, I thought some schmendrick in the media might have decided to say Kiev. So
That's
everybody's
the
now
point, that
saying
Kiev
Kiev.
is the Russian pronunciation.
I understand, but it's a pronunciation we've been using for, since I can remember. And that's fine. I'll say Kiev. But I guess, look, the point is that
I
Kiev,
mean, you're on the side of the Ukrainians?
no, it's just that it is Ukraine. And if that's how the Ukrainians pronounce it, that's what it is.
Well, no, I mean,
Ukrainian,
it's a Sibboleth. I mean, it's saying
no, no, the Ukrainian language is a little different than the Russian language. Like for example, in China,
you're
they
picking a
define it.
side, but you're picking a
No, I'm not
side by
taking a
saying
side.
Kiev versus Kiev.
No, I'm saying that I respect whether or not Ukraine even exists in the future. They still have a right to their language, and their language they say Kiev, so I'll say Kiev. Just like in China in the 1970s, they went to Mandarin. So I mean, I grew up saying Peking, but after the 1970s, you then said Beijing. I can respect that. That's a cultural thing. But putting that aside, it's a city of, I think, over 1 million people.
Is
Is
3 million people even
3
maybe?
million people. I mean, I don't think that that's something that you can have a war there. I mean, it would result in huge loss of life. Don't they have to kind of like lay low and you can't. It's not the kind of place where a battle can take place.
But
Or
I mean, that's we give the comparison of Gaza. So if Russia wants to demilitarize, and that means they're going to take the military installments and the government buildings in the city, and that's their military objective, to demilitarize Kiev,
sure.
that they can do that. And the only thing that the Ukrainians could do is basically use civilian shields. So say is the goal to take over, but it's like to
And do you
demilitarize
think
it.
civilians are going to be willing to die like that? I mean, to defend that city?
Well, yeah, I mean, people are generally, I mean, just like Palestinians, anywhere, people are willing to die to defend their land, although they might not be willing to die to defend their government or their leaders or the military installments or the government buildings. I mean, Russia claims that they're taking. It would appear that Russia, I mean, just I mean, the best,
The other thing
we're
Russia
talking
has
about
to be
like
very
Israel,
careful about.
Palestine, that, yeah, Russia's being extremely careful to not do civilian casualties. And I mean, really what happens in, Israel, Palestine is small time compared to, like Israel's weaponry in general compared to what Russia has is small time.
Of course, Russia is one of the world's most is the largest superpowers, of course, with nuclear everything. But the thing is, the
Even
other.
without nuclear weapons, I think Russia could easily
Oh yeah, no, I don't doubt that.
tomorrow kill all 3 million people in
But
Kiev
they're not doing that.
without
They're
even
trying.
resorting to
The
the,
other thing they have to be careful about is that in the downtown, in the Maidan area, you have a magnificent Russian Orthodox cathedrals and Christian iconic locations. And I think that the Russians have to be very careful not to damage that, because if they do, that's going to piss off the entire Christian world.
yeah, I mean, it appear they only have been going after military sites, except in certain areas on the west where there's been more fighting. Although, like the more resistance that Russia, I mean, it's really going to come down to, like, God forbid, what we always talking about, like in Israel, that
Mm.
if you Ukrainians fight and then run to hide in civilian areas, will the Russians go after them in the civilian areas, and saying that's a, God forbid, guerrilla warfare, urban warfare, God forbid, it's almost guaranteed to happen that Ukrainians, some guy with a Molotov cocktail, if he's lucky, and bombs a tank, and then, what's he going to do? He's going to run and hide in a civilian area, and then, God forbid, what are the Russians going to do? That they're going to attack the civilian area. So I mean, God forbid, it's almost guaranteed to happen, and that's why so many refugees. I mean, God forbid, like, could be Israel would have an interesting role, saying that to negotiate a surrender of some sort of terms. Like at this point, it could be a week, it could be months. Uh, the hope right now in the West is like we're going to shame or international pressure or sanctions, and Russia's just going to give up and go home. But like
I don't think so.
militaristically,
Russia's been through this before. In 1956, they rolled tanks into Budapest. 1967, they rolled tanks into Prague. They've done it before, and the world was outraged, and everybody got their knickers, tightened into a knot. But yet, the Russians went ahead and did what they had to do according to them, and things went back as normal. Although obviously in 1989, the whole edifice collapsed.
it
So,
would be like, God forbid, Israel and Gaza, where Russia is going to come in and demilitarize Ukraine and then leave, and then Ukraine will remilitarize
demilitarized, yeah,
like
like
Gaza, and
Gaza.
then in another few years, Russia is going to have to come back in and demilitarize Ukraine again.
Well, how militarized is the Ukraine?
Um,
You're saying that now, all of a sudden now Zelensky, as Russian troops are crossing in, he's arming civilians. I mean, they obviously are not. I mean, in Gaza, they are seriously militarized. I mean, those people, they've proven that they will fight to the death. I mean, that seems to be a whole different deal.
well, yeah, and it's in Ukraine's a huge country with tens of millions of people. In
Right.
Gaza, there's 1.5 million people, and even Hamas, if their numbers have tens of thousands of military, it's mostly civilians, but Hamas has hundreds of thousands of supporters and tens of thousands of conscripted, armed, trained people. I think the Ukrainian army only has like 100 some thousand conscripts. I mean, we have the numbers, like the exact number of tanks and equipment that they
Yeah,
have,
but the
and
thing is that
there's
with
probably,
Gaza, you have average citizens who are guerrillas and who are completely radicalized. I'm not sure the same phenomena exists in Ukraine. I
well, I
think
mean, Ukraine
most
has developed a
Ukrainians
proper army with it has, some 100 some thousand people in
in a military, but I'm
in the
talking
military.
in
And that's why I
Gaza,
said
it's not an
that's
army.
where it come like the denazification, is that who are those 100,000 people, and was there, is Ukraine kind of like a fake puppet state, and did they raise up literally like neo-Nazi groups that were willing
Well, I don't
to
know if that's
raise,
true or not, but that is what
but
Russia's.
who is this 100 some thousand people, and especially in the eastern Ukraine, where they've had been trying to where there's active elements of war. So saying there's tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers that are actively in military conflict for the last decade in the Donbas region. And who are those people? Where do they come from? Were they average Ukrainians that just wanted to do some sort of duty? I don't think they have some sort of conscription, so it's a voluntary army. And so God forbid, said the Russian, ambassador in Israel stuck and defended the denazification in Israel, and the Israeli press was, just like, don't be ridiculous. These guys aren't Nazis. And the Russian was saying, like, these guys are Nazis, but it's the story. We're sticking to it.
Right. Well, that is their story. And it's hard to know the truth because both sides are going to present their side and both sides are going to lie. That happens in every war. It's called propaganda. It's a wartime propaganda, atrocity propaganda. It's hard to know the truth in the middle of when people are shooting. And, I think that one of the other byproducts of this is that there are now, I understand, over 1 million Ukrainians who are, crossing the border into Poland, and that there could be a huge influx of Ukrainian refugees even into the United States. I wonder how they'll be received.
It's ironic, as opposed to Syria, like it's illegal in Ukraine for men to flee, which goes back to like the Iron Curtain and like Natan Sharansky in Israel, where like Jews, it was illegal to try to flee, and people like Sharansky were put in prison. So currently in the Ukraine, it's the similar circumstance where only women and children are legally allowed to flee.
Okay. I mean, I don't know what the situation is, but I think that at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of refugees coming out of that country. And
Well, I mean, it's unclear. Like, I mean, one thing like doesn't make sense that Ukraine, yeah, I mean, if Ukraine collapses completely, could it be, millions? Is there some sort of, saying like, does it make sense to force the men to stay and fight? And if that collapses, will it be millions of Ukrainians that will leave? And then the question, right now, supposedly, like, yeah, open arms, everybody wants them, even but I wouldn't be so sure that that's the case, even though like, okay, like a little bit of racism that Ukrainians are European or largely white, or blue-eyed people, but the likelihood that Europe wants to accept all these Ukrainian refugees could just be talk, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't really want to, and that they don't really accept these refugees. I mean, you think that like, is it just racism like that? Like Syria, they didn't want to take all these refugees, or they took like certain numbers, but like Ukrainians, because they're fellow Europeans, they're going to take them in mass, or that it's going to, at a certain point, they can't do nothing for you, man. I'm sorry.
Okay. Gee, we're getting some.
You think they're really going to take millions of Ukrainian refugees?
I don't know. Maybe after the
Israel just claimed that, like, a college Shekhet from Israel just said that Israel's prepared to take over 200,000, all of them. So I think there's 45,000 registered, or people that have some sort of recognition that Israel would immediately accept into Israel, and possibly 200,000 more. And I guess the current
200,000 Jewish refugees.
has the current minister in charge is already setting up for the possibility of absorbing over 200,000 Ukrainians into Israel immediately.
Right, Ukrainian Jews, which of course gets to Israel's mission as the,
Israel is like Russia. Does Israel
people.
break Ukrainian law and help men flee, even though currently now it's illegal for men to
Well,
leave
it's not
Ukraine?
breaking Ukrainian law. I mean, if a Jew flees from danger in a country, it's Jewish law, or it's Israeli law, that they are welcomed into the Eretz Israel. I mean, that's one of Israel's basic raison d'etre, if you will.
Yeah,
to
but it's saying like the Russia is saying, if Ukraine says it's illegal for you to leave,
well,
and
that's
then
Ukraine's business. That's not Israel.
Russian Jewish men illegally try to leave, just okay, thank God there's Israel, and Israel's going to be willing to take them. But just the scenario that Ukrainian adult Jewish men would illegally have to leave the Ukraine against the current.
Well, no, but that's not Israel's business. Isn't what Ukraine does in their law. It's Israel's business to help Jews from under any circumstance who want to make Aliyah. They welcomed in, I think, about 500,000 Russian Jews. I imagine that they broke Russian law when they came in the late 1970s. So, I mean, Israel doesn't have to be concerned with the various peccadillos of the law in other countries when it comes to Jews. I mean, their law is to welcome Jews who come to their country under almost any circumstance. Not any, I mean, Israel
And it makes
denied,
it more complicated and saying what goes for Ukrainian
I don't know
Jewish
if that,
guys is if Israel is helping
maybe if Israel encouraged
helping
it, it could be a problem.
Ukrainian Jewish citizens break Ukrainian law
No, I mean,
and
look,
leave
if
and
Israel
come into their
encourages
country.
it, then maybe it might be a problem. But if Israel simply passively accepts the immigration, I don't see that as an issue. I mean, Israel denied asylum to Meyer Lansky back in the 1970s because he was a criminal and he wanted to go to Israel to get away from the American authorities. So they don't, well, and he said, well, look, I'm a Jew and I want to.
Well, I mean, it's the irony of Ukraine having a Jewish president. So if the Zelensky declared martial law, and he declared it illegal for men to leave the Ukraine, and so this Jewish president of Ukraine, at the same time, Israel would be the same time that the Jewish president of the Ukraine is making it illegal for Ukrainians to leave and trying to conscript them and force them to fight. That the Jewish state would be breaking the Jewish president of Ukraine's dictum to help Jews flee.
Well, I mean, I don't think, again, I don't want to go on a merry-go-round here, but I don't think Israel's breaking the law. The
They're
citizen,
breaking the Ukrainian law.
no, it's the citizen breaking
I mean, they're helping the Ukrainian
no, no,
Jews
no.
break Ukrainian
The
law.
Ukrainian citizen who happens to be a Jew who might be breaking Ukrainian law, but he's not breaking Israel's law by asking asylum. It's kind of maybe we're splitting hairs here, but Israel has a sense of mission to welcome any Jew who wants to go there. And regardless, I mean, I'm sure the Jews broke the law by trying to flee from Egypt right after 1948. In fact, they did.
Yeah, I
But
mean, saying like let's say, just hypothetically, let's say over the next few weeks that Ukraine decides to keep on fighting and Russia keeps on pushing forward and it becomes disastrous to the point where tens of thousands of Ukrainian Jews, adult Jewish men, do break Ukrainian law and flee to Israel. What's going to be the outcome where you have a Jewish president that is trying to enforce this law that men can't
well,
leave
that's his
Ukraine,
problem. The outcome
and
will
then
be that that 10,000 Jewish men and their families will make Aliyah to Israel, and it'll be a boon for Israel, frankly, to welcome in Ukrainian Jews. I mean, not that I hope that anybody has to be uprooted and forced out of their homes,
it would be a
but
boon. I mean, they could induct him into the IDF and fight
yeah,
the
and
Palestinians. And what I mean, like at some
or
point,
they could just become
Israel's
a
going
part
to
of
have
Israeli
continued
society.
relationship with the United States and with Europe and Ukraine and
I don't.
Russia.
I
And
mean,
saying
was it a problem for Israel to welcome Russian Soviet Jews? I mean, it would be a boon to Israeli society to have.
what is? I'm saying that's part of why continued difficulties between Israel and Russia, and saying like certainly the
You mean
state of
that they
Ukraine.
welcomed in Russia, Soviet Jews? That's a problem for Israel and Russia now? I don't think so.
What are you going to tell? What is Israel going to tell? What are the Ukrainian Jews going to tell their fellow Ukrainians? Uh, and how is Israel
Well, I
going
mean,
to
there
have?
were other
How is
Ukrainians
Israel Israel going to have relationships with
I
Ukraine
honestly
going
don't think it's.
forward if they help Ukrainians break the
No,
law?
but I honestly don't think it's an issue because you've got 1 million Ukrainians going to Poland. I mean, they're doing the same thing. I mean,
Yeah, but
probably
it's
you'll have.
NATO, and it's saying that, and that's not.
What
It's
is
saying
it?
no. I mean that's only women and children. They're not letting it.
It's
They're
not
not
men.
letting adult men
So then
go to
adult men
Poland.
are not getting into Poland? Okay,
There
maybe,
might be a handful, but it's saying that like no. It's saying like I don't think.
okay.
I think it's only women and children.
And
Saying
Israel is,
maybe
on the
some
other hand,
exception.
encouraging uh, Jewish Ukrainian adult men to come to Israel. Is that what you're saying?
Not yet. So I'm not exactly sure how it's happened or what's going to happen. I'm just saying a possible scenario that the interior minister or whatever, Italia Shek had said that they're preparing to absorb up to 200,000 Ukrainians, and I don't think that they've
I don't
thought
think they're
through
worried about whether it's
the
male or female. They just want to help Jews who are in trouble. That's all. That's Israel's mission. Anyway, David, what's going on in Israel?
well, I mean, it's all Ukraine. So ironically, there was the Tel Aviv Cybersecurity Summit today, and so Netanyahu and Bennett spoke at it, And so I didn't know this, although it makes sense that like Israel's cybersecurity like units are actually based in the Ukraine. So Netanyahu said that there's 15,000 Israelis in the Ukraine that work in cybersecurity, employing
Sure.
50,000 Ukrainians. And it's funny, like God forbid, because everyone's like talking about the Ukrainians in a certain extent. Uh, we talked about I'm always talking about the failure of Zionism, where you have kind of these halakhically non-Jewish, like Ukrainians and Russians that are upstanding Russian citizens, versus the Haredim that are 100% Jewish, that are God forbid, according to
Troublesome.
Israel itself, like pariahs on the state. So Bennett was saying, like, if we could only get the replace the Ukrainian workers with the Haredim, and he was mentioning the difficulty where Bennett is like hopeful that that I mean, one thing, like Israel. So Israel has a existential problem, because cybersecurity is probably one of their bigger economic or even military technologies, that if it's actually largely based in the Ukrainian, and that the I mean, maybe Ukrainians are like high IQ like that, that
They're
they would
very
have.
advanced in that way. Ukraine is a major center for cybersecurity, for anything to do with computer. It's
So I
very
mean,
advanced. Ukraine
if
is not some backward country here. I mean, it's
well,
also,
they only have a $6,000 GDP. Like, it's one of the poorest countries. I think
yeah,
it's
but
the
it may be, but
poorest
it's
country in
also
Europe.
extremely rich in resources. I mean, Ukraine is one of the top producers of various farm products and minerals. I mean, it's a wealthy country in terms of resources. I don't know. Is it one of the poorer countries in Europe? I don't know that, but
Yeah, I think it's I mean,
you know,
up at least with the poorest. I mean, 6,000
the thing that's
dollars.
sad about Ukraine is that, I mean, I think from day one, I mean, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they've never been able to develop a state that is not riddled with corruption
I
and
think
one
there's
that
still
has
ruins. I mean,
stability.
like parts of Eastern Russia, there's literally still the ruins of World War II. Like
Right.
large parts you drive by, and there's literally still the ruins and
I know
war
that's true in
destruction from World
Moldova,
War II.
very poor country. It's the poorest country in Europe. But
Mm.
you
So
know,
I
you
mean,
think that some of the countries, like for example, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they have really become powerhouses economically. Slovakia is a powerhouse. It's absolutely advancing. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So, is there something about Ukrainian culture that, I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't have been able to have developed an advanced country, especially since Ukraine itself, as I said, it's very blessed with incredible natural resources. It's seen as the breadbasket of Europe for a reason. I mean, it
was a
has,
puppet, because it's really a puppet, like CIA,
well,
NATO
that's what I
puppet
mean.
government.
The government is so corrupt,
That is it.
such corruption there, and it's being yanked around by all sides, Russia, the United States, Europe. They've not been able to really take hand of their own destiny as a sovereign state, unlike the other countries I just mentioned, unlike the Baltic states and Slovakia, which did, and Poland. Poland is incredible. I mean, it's a powerhouse, and they were just as poor before the collapse of the Iron Curtain. I mean, as Ukraine. But for whatever reason, I mean, it's something that would have to be looked at by sociologists, but maybe it's something in the Ukrainian culture, whatever it is, they have not been able to have moved beyond this failed state in terms of politically, and that does matter. They were
In
not
the
able.
Israeli papers, I mean, Zelensky's been kind of like calling and begging Bennett for help, and Bennett's been kind of giving him a cold shoulder, that
Right.
which
I think
is
everybody's
possible.
giving him a cold shoulder. I mean, and
I mean,
people are
I'm not
giving
really
lip
sure what he
service.
could do to help them. I mean, really, I mean, they're even, it's like, bomb the Russians. Like, really, he wants them to
Have a
fight
nuclear war with
Russia for
Russia?
him, which would be suicide. I mean, not even the U.S. is willing to fight Russia. So if Zelensky's calling Bennett and, like, sending the planes to bomb the Russians.
No, that's insane. That
Well, I
that
mean, as maybe Zelensky's lost his mind,
well,
and
that's what I mean. Maybe
literally he's on the phone calling Bennett, begging him to bomb the Russians.
he should move to London. I don't know. I mean, it's just, that's not rational.
I mean,
Nobody wants to have a world war
is it
over.
possible that Israel or could negotiate a surrender of Ukraine? And what would that look like, a surrender?
I think Israel should stay out of it. Maybe let the European
Israel's
Union.
really in the only position. You could somewhat look at, I mean, not territorially, but demographically, like Israel is almost like a former Soviet state. In terms of numbers, I'm saying like there's literally like
I mean, because of the number of
2 million
Russians.
Russians, like there's like over 1 million Russians and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. But saying just in even in high levels of government, is saying Israel even has a Russian party, and so Israel is
Yeah,
uniquely
that's true.
in a situation to negotiate it, and even looking that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians would think to go to Israel, and that would be permanent, that if they went to
No,
Israel,
maybe
probably
they are,
never
but I
go back.
mean,
That
Israel
leaves
has to
Israel
ask
in a
itself
unique.
what are its interests in terms of serving that role. And I would think that they don't have an interest in getting involved. Would Israel get involved in the Armenian Azerbaijani conflict? It's sort of like, why? It
Because
doesn't.
demographically, that because
Okay.
Israel has over 1 million Russians there.
Yeah, but those Russians,
I mean, there are Azerbaijani and Guzini Jews, but saying like demographically,
I understand.
Israel's almost like a former Soviet state, and just like in terms of like literally, like 1.5 million
Yeah, but
Soviets,
these are Russians who
1.5 million
want to live.
Soviets left,
Yeah, to
left.
get out of Russia. They're not like these are exiles. In a way, they probably view themselves as refugees from Russia, and they are
But they kept Russian culture. So ironically,
to an extent.
but I say most Russian Jews still speak Russian and maintain Russian culture, even to second, third generation. That saying Russian culture is probably even more dominant than, certainly more dominant than, like, you have American popular culture, but I mean Russian culture is probably the dominant culture of a foreign culture in Israel.
Well,
And
actually, no, I don't think
you
it
even have
is.
a Russian party in the coalition.
No, I
Saying
don't
like
think. You know what I think the dominant culture is in Israel, and this is something that people don't really, they overlook this, but it's actually a more defining culture, and that is the Arab culture, the Arab Jews, Jews who came into Israel from Morocco, Egypt, Libya, Syria, after 1948 and even beyond up until the 1950s. The
Right, I
Mizrahi,
mean, there's a lot more Jews in Israel that speak Russian than Arabic. I mean,
uh,
even with
I don't
there's
think
just
that's
like
true.
there's factually many more Russian speaking Jews
I'm
than
not
Arabic
sure that's
speaking Jews.
true. And I think that the Mizrahi Jews
We
have
got Masad in the chat. I don't know if he give an answer to that, like
maybe we could
early,
get
but
that demographic, but I think that the Mizrahi Jews have a huge percentage of Israel. There's been a lot of intermarriage.
almost none of them speak Arabic anymore,
Maybe
unless
they
they
don't, but
actually
they
were
still
born
have.
in Arab nations, as opposed to the Russians. Their kids still speak Russian,
Okay, but maybe they
as
haven't
opposed
kept
to the
up with it.
Arab Jews. Their kids don't speak Arabic
Maybe
anymore.
not, but the thing is still there's a cultural affinity and they still have a certain Islamic quality to their Judaism. And, there's a huge element of that in Israel. And there's been a lot of intermarriage. I know this is strictly anecdotal, but my cousin and his wife made Aliyah to Israel in the 1960s. He didn't want to fight in the Vietnam War, but he ended up fighting it for the IDF. And he was an Orthodox Jew. And he had 4 children. And of those 4 children, 3 of them married Mizrahi Jews. And I think that's typical. The fourth one married an American. But I think that's actually typical of what's going on in Israel. There's a huge merge of cultures. It's no longer, see, Israel, the left likes to say that Israel's like a colonial state of Europeans. That maybe was true in 1948, but that's no longer true. I mean, most Israelis, more than half of the Israelis, actually come from the Middle East. Israel is a Middle Eastern country. Israel is almost like an Arab country. Now, I know the Israeli, the Jews who come from the Arab countries don't like to call themselves Arab Jews, but they actually are. And I think that Israel, if you go to Israel, I haven't been there in many years, but you get a sense that it is very much an Arab country. It's very Middle Eastern. I understand that the Russians came in the 1980s, but I don't know if that's a dominant culture there. It's a big culture, but I'm not sure it's dominant.
Yeah, I mean, we could look up the numbers. I mean, the numbers
Sure.
are the numbers, but I'm saying factually that Russians play a huge part in Israel. There's also hundreds of thousands of Russian non-Jews in Israel that serve in the army, that
Right.
serve in the government. Even historically, that
Hundreds of thousands.
Russians have been the
There's
most
a number.
successful. Russian non-Jews have historically infiltrated even high levels of the Israeli government. And
Are
in
they
terms
loyal
of
to the
Israeli,
Israeli state?
well, going back to the founding of Israel, there's been Russian non-Jews
Russians.
who have successfully infiltrated Israel,
Okay.
and until today, I mean, Putin has mentioned this himself, that he considers Israel like a former Russian state, and
No,
you know,
I know that. In fact, Putin, when he was growing up, he had a teacher who was a Russian Jew, who was a huge influence on him, and she ended up making Aliyah to Israel. And when he came to Israel as prime minister of Russia, he visited her in her apartment in Tel Aviv, and he actually made comments like that. So yeah, I mean, there's probably a certain comfort there for Russians with Israel, and I think that Israel has always had its own relationship with Russia, kind of a maybe a love-hate relationship, but you know it's not strictly. I mean, when it came to the Cold War, Israel tilted toward the United States, but not completely. I think that Ben Gurion, in the first year of Israel's independence, made it clear that he was going to tilt to the United States and that Israel was not going to become a Soviet satellite. It was moving away from socialism and communism, and that it would be a Western capitalist oriented democracy.
just the
But
Iran deal. Netanyahu's pounding on the Iran deal. Looks like this conflict, I don't know, God forbid, say will play well for Iran. Even the U.S. looks like it's ready to enter a deal with Iran. So in
yeah,
Israeli news, that's one of the bigger news pieces. Also, is like, don't forget Iran and Israel's probably losing its bargaining chips. In terms of with America and Europe and Russia, that Israel's protest to the Iran deal, and then even questioning like, well, if Israel has to strike Iran on its own, will it do it? Does Israel need Russian permission, even with what's going on in Syria? And then, like I've even been mentioning, is the possibility that you're saying that Israel will give up on even portraying itself like a Western liberal democracy and move towards the totalitarian state, and even to pivot towards the East and
well,
Russia,
it's not
and just saying like,
entirely a
okay, like
Western.
you'll turn a blind eye to what we're doing to Palestinians, and Israel will turn a blind eye to what Saudi Arabia is doing to Yemenites, and so on and so on, and just align with Putin. Netanyahu spoke today, almost kind of hinting, because I mentioned last week in Lapid, basically, so Israel was one of the sponsors of condemning Russia in the UN today. Lapid spoke very out against it. Bennett didn't comment. Netanyahu remained kind of neutral, and it might leave ground in Israel for a new coalition of a pro-Russian stance on this. And so it's pretty unclear. We talked about that a little bit last week, and saying if Russia's almost certainly going to be the victor in what's going on, and then there's just continued condemnations, like the West and American politicians are just going to condemn and maybe try to do sanctions, but at the end of the day, that's all we could do. Where would what at some point does Israel turn the tables and side with Russia? But I mean, Israel's going
I
to be
don't
in
know,
a tough
but I
situation
have
because
noticed that
Iran and Syria also.
a lot
I
of
mean,
the real
Russia's allied with Iran and Syria.
yeah, but a lot of the real left-wing, old left states have sided with Russia. Venezuela, Cuba, China. I don't know about North Korea and Vietnam, but there is a bit of a tilt toward Russia among the far left and maybe even the far right, I'm told, tends to side with Russia. I mean, I don't know if you believe some of the Democratic Party, people, the Trump haters, but they keep pointing fingers saying, oh, look, Trump is siding with Russia and that the Trumpers are all, which is a bunch of crap. But the thing is that who knows? I mean, maybe there might be a tilt. I don't think so. I think most Americans just culturally are not siding with Russia. I mean, they side with sovereignty and with Ukraine, but that doesn't mean that we want to go to war. Anyway, David.
Most Americans probably don't care. Even like Kamala Harris made some statement, I guess, like to African American radio, and I mean, it's only the media establishment that's making a big deal about it. I would assume most Americans.
Most Americans are worried about the price of hamburger. That's what and the price of gas. That's what Americans are worried about right now.
Yeah, it's unlikely that.
And by the way, that the price of gas is going up because of Putin's, Biden's policies. David, what do you have coming up on your show?
I haven't really been doing much. I mean, because I'm not a media personality. Like, saying I just I pop on shows occasionally or just talk to people, a commentary. Like I'm not a media personality like that. I have a few interviews. I might talk to another person in India this week that he's got some theory that the Exodus really happened in India. I guess you're reaching out to me. I'm not sure if I'll do that. I tried to book this guy from The Crucible to come on your channel. He said he'd do it. This guy, he's actually in Michigan and kind of like
let's put him on, David. I have a wide open schedule.
I reached out to Kevin Barrett also.
Yeah, let's put him on.
And this
too.
guy Rodney.
You and I could do it together. We'll do like
it's tough to get people like to book people. I'm trying to move into booking agent and because the censorship, people just want to push a narrative and
well, we don't have to necessarily
working together with people.
We don't have to run it on YouTube, but see if you can get some. We could do a three-way talk. I mean, let's do.
Maybe this guy in the chat, the Mossad Jumanati. In fact, he had Mordecai Kedar on his channel.
Oh, I like Kedar.
I know you spoke with him.
Yeah, I like him.
I think it's problematic, like Kedar, in terms of saying like, you don't need an Israeli to explain to you what Arabs believe. Like, if you want to know what Arabs believe, you're better off just speaking to Arabs.
Let's bring Arabs on.
Also, like Russians. I mean, if Kedar is an expert on, you want Kedar to tell you about Israel, not Arabs.
Right.
And I mean, you could have him. He has expertise on Arabs, but
he does. He has an interesting theory.
As saying that it puts you in a bad situation. Like, okay, like
I know what you mean. It's like he kind of
also like you telling people what Christians think. Like,
exactly.
I hear from Christians, and it's saying you don't know a lot about Christianity or scholarship.
But sure, you need to hear it from the horse's mouth. No, I get that. Or it's like listening to E. Michael Jones talk about what Jews are like.
You call like Hasbora to trying to change people's minds. As if you have scholarship or knowledge on a certain issue, so I have scholarship on Judaism that's kind of independent, but Jews in institutions, they have talking points or baselines, or Israelis or various people. So most of the people in media have some sort of call it agenda, might be pejorative, but they have certain views that they're pushing versus.
Oh, I get it. Everyone has their agendas. Just speaking of Mordechai Kedar, he made an interesting observation, because last time we had him on, I asked him about a controversy that had to do with Israeli Arabs and how are they how loyal are they to the Jewish state? And I don't exactly remember his answer, but he did make an interesting observation, and that he said that Israeli Arabs, a large number of them who want to be professionals, tend to go into pharmacy. He said in Israel, if you go to a pharmacy, it's staffed by Israeli Arabs. It's kind of like certain industries, even in this country, that for whatever reason, Vietnamese women have gotten into manicures and pedicures. They're opening shops all over Boston that do this. There are certain professions that people get into. And he said that in Israel, the Israeli Arabs seem to dominate the pharmacy, and it's a nice profession for them. It's a very good, clean, well-paying thing. I just thought it was an interesting observation on his part.
Well, if you don't have to go to bed, you do have 15 viewers, and just to mention on that,
Yeah.
University of Michigan, when they first passed the BDS, they ran it for like 10 years straight. It was led by an Israeli Arab Christian.
The
no,
BBS, what BBF was? Yeah, that doesn't
Well, I was
surprise.
saying that BDS passed when the Students for Justice in Palestine was led by someone with Israeli citizenship. In Michigan, there was a newspaper article today with Haley Stevens in the district against Andy Levin, about Andy Levin is less supportive of Israel than Haley Stevens, but in the district next to it actually will be running against John Jones, who has given up on running for senator and now just running for congressman. So the Israeli Arab woman, Huwaida Arif, who I've met, who is a civil rights lawyer and is a BDS activist, is an Israeli citizenship. So you saw that in Michigan.
Well, that's troubling. That's like
the point that okay, that
raises
you have
questions about
the
loyalty.
agenda, you have what someone like Mordecai Kedar is saying, but it's saying like, no, in Michigan, some of this woman running for Congress
Sure.
is an Israeli citizen and supporting BDS. And University of
Well,
Michigan,
I don't think one
BDS failed year after year. BDS only passed when an Israeli Arab was the
No,
leader.
I can't speak for him, but I don't think that he would deny that there's a segment of the Israeli Arab population that is not loyal. Let me
Huwaida Arif is an Israeli.
And
He
is
was
not
born here in
loyal,
America,
but is trying to sabotage the state of Israel. 617-396-4958. Maybe before we sign off, we could take a call. You're welcome to join the program. I know somebody sent me a note saying that they were trying to call the number, they couldn't get through, but I don't think it should be a problem. So please call. I have the phone up here, and you can go on the air with us, 617-396-4958. So yeah, David, book people on the show. See if you can get Richard Spencer.
Oh, I don't really want to reach out to like people I speak to. Like I reach out and ask them, but like I'm not going to reach out, especially to these kind of like infamous people. I'm not going to reach out to infamous people and try to speak to them. And God forbid that like these people reach out to speak to me, so I'll book them on the show. But like God forbid, I'm not going to like Jennifer. I'd rather try to get more. Mainstream, even God forbid, I don't want to be a fringe personality and like that, but try to have more mainstream conversation. It's tough to get mainstream people. I mean, maybe if we get like Huwaida Arif to come on the show, I guess that woman Presley, if she have a lock, she like Rashida Tlaib, like I would like to speak to her, and the likely she's going to be my congressperson. She's going to
Put her
be
on the show. Let's get her
a
up.
congressperson for the local Orthodox area here in Michigan. I assume that the woman Presley, she gave the progressive response to Biden's national news attention. I assume that woman Presley.
How did that? Oh, you mean Ayanna Presley here,
She's going
Boston?
to be your congressperson.
She is our congressperson, and
I'm saying she's going to win easily. There's
there's no opposition. She's a squad member, and she's one of the biggest. But
so she's got funding, and there's no serious.
Yeah, no one's and
whoever wins the Democratic primary wins, and there's no serious Democratic
right.
primary against her.
Nobody would take her on. I would have liked to have run against her, but I can't for personal reasons.
Well, I mean, God forbid is if you ran against her as a Democrat and beat her in the primary, but in your district, your chance of winning as a Republican is like in the single digits.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, although things can happen, this year, this coming election.
You did get 60,000 votes. I mean, that's a lot of votes, but I'm saying you still, that was only 20% of the votes.
25%.
Even if you could get 100,000 votes, like miraculously,
I think that there's
Presley will almost certainly get 250,000.
Probably, but something, I think that there's a little shift this year. I think that people are going to be surprised by how well Republicans do in what has been conventionally Democrat strongholds. I would point particularly as an example to this election that just took place in Texas. Hispanics voted for Republicans something like 80%. That is huge. African Americans, especially African American men, they're breaking for Republicans at almost like 40%. And that is a major, like, I don't think that the Democrats, I think they'll hold on to that vote. But even to shave off a few of those percentages, that can lead to a major shift. And I do
Yeah,
think,
they're saying the Republicans are likely to take back the House and in the
yes,
Senate. But
I
in your
think that they
district, there's
will.
not
And
that,
I
there's
think
not
that,
that many there's not that many Mexicans in your district,
well, there are in Massachusetts. But the
but not
thing,
in your district. I'm saying not the.
well, that's right. But the point is, I think that people are starting to break Republican, even many traditional Democratic voters, because they want to see certain things happen. I think that they understand that if the Republicans take back both houses, especially MAGA Republicans, Trump supporting Republicans, then there's going to be some major investigations that will never happen if the Democrats control. Like, for example, we're going to finally get to the bottom of all of the political stuff surrounding the pandemic. What was the truth as opposed to what was, what was politics as opposed to what is science?
Yeah, I spoke to Deshaun today, and the COVID numbers, thank God, are down quite a bit. So I might have him
Right.
to do a stream maybe next week. And so if you want, um, I think
I'm
I'll-
having a guest on Monday who's going to talk about COVID, but I just,
maybe I could have him on your channel again. I mean, if you want next Thursday, or if or
Yeah.
maybe a different night, I could bring him over and have Deshaun talk about Black conservatives here in
sure, send me a note about it. We'll do it. Yep, absolutely. All right, David. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me. Let me just mention that my books are available at Amazon Books. I have to put in a little plug. That's how I support the show.
We got 15 people, so if you want, I'll sign off, and if you want to,
I'm going
if you want to
to,
monologue to the audience, you got a little bit of a viewership. So I'll sign off and wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll pray
Shalom.
for better things, de-escalation. It's tough to see any good path forward, and if you want to take advantage of a little audience here, you could go ahead and monologue a little bit, or maybe
All
get some
right.
calls.
Thanks a lot, David. All right, I'll talk to you next week, and please feel free to book guests. All right, so that's David. Thanks for joining me as always. You're welcome to join me just in a quick final segment here, 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. We're getting a ton of very interesting, you can join on Zoom, but not phone calls. Yeah, you can join on Zoom. Let me put the Zoom number here. I'll just, you know what? I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to put it right into the chat. And yeah, let me just see. Here, I'm going to copy it in there. Yeah, join by Zoom. Why not? Whoops, I don't think it's taking it. No, because I think I put too many numbers in there. Let me just go like this. I'm going to just hump for a little bit here. And I think if I click this button, and as people can tell, I am not all that competent when it comes to technology, but let's just go like this, and let's go like that. And there we go. Okay. So I just sent the Zoom link. If you want to join the program by Zoom, come on down. I mean, I'll entertain a Zoom guest. Thank God for the Canadian truckers, because I think that if it had not been for them, we would not get rid of the goddamn masks so quickly. I think that people, Trudeau really stepped in it when he said, "Oh, they're Nazis," they're Hitler all of a sudden, his own people, and and he wouldn't meet them, wouldn't speak to them. And I think that the majority of Canadians and the majority of Americans didn't buy it. They believe that all they were trying to do was call attention to these mandates, and that they are wrong, and that they're not working, and they never worked probably, and that it's time to take back our freedom. The only thing I caution about that is that, even though the response to the truckers, even here in Boston, has been to repeal the mandates, right? I think as of this Saturday, the masks will be gone as a matter of city policy in Boston. The passports will be gone. I will just caution people that the end of these mandates is tactical. They are still in place. They're just withdrawing because I think the establishment doesn't want to be too visible here, because they can now see that the tea leaves. They can see that because of the truckers and their support, universal support, including huge protests in places like Canberra in Australia and in New Zealand and in Paris and apparently in Vienna and even I think in Israel, that they have to appear to be withdrawing some of these mandates, and they are withdrawing them, but they're not fully. I mean, they're holding on to the power to reenact them at any time. And I think that given an excuse, heaven forbid, maybe another variant, as they call them, or maybe they'll just do it because they'll say, well, there's a problem with global warming, or who knows what. They will redo it because governments don't relinquish power voluntarily. They don't relinquish it easily. They'll only relinquish it if it is taken back from them. And that's ultimately what we're going to have to do if we're ever going to get our power back. And the only way to do that, I would argue, is for Republicans to win the election in 7 or 8 months from now in a big way, and in a way that really makes a difference and that shifts the dynamic and that puts in enough MAGA Republicans so that we can investigate the pandemic. And they will investigate it. We'll find out if there was gain of function research and if it was backed by certain scientists behind the back of 2 presidents, Obama and Trump. We will find out whether or not early medical treatments were denied. We will find out the truth about the vaccine. I'm not commenting on it. So, people, you YouTube censors, I've had the vaccine, but we don't have the full truth. There's been an enormous amount of censorship. And the only way we're going to get to the truth is to have a Republican Congress. And if we do get to the truth and everything is revealed through our constitutional system, our democracy, where there are hearings, there's testimony, it's televised, our representatives on both sides get to ask questions, and a report is issued with recommendations. Only then, that is how our system works, will we get to the truth, and only then will we find out whether or not all of these things, the lockdowns, the masks, the vaccines, all of it, the passports, if any of these things actually did anything to reduce the virus. And if we find out that it didn't, and I'm not saying it didn't, it's an opinion, then we will then know that they'll never do it again. Otherwise, they're going to hold on to these powers and they're going to implement them from time to time, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and they are not going to voluntarily relinquish those powers. So that's my pitch for that. Even if you're a liberal and a Democrat and a Trump hater, for your own interest, for the future of this country, as a way to get to basic truths, we have to elect Republicans in November, even some of the bad Republicans, preferably the Trump Republicans, but any Republican will do, just to get the majority and get enough of them in there so that the good Republicans can start to take actions. Otherwise, we're not going to have a free country and we're not going to have a free future. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you for joining me, everyone. I'm going to be on earlier tomorrow because it's Shabbos. I don't go on at night. So I'll have Michael D. Shaw in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And check out my books. They're available at Amazon Books. That's how you can help the program. I don't accept donations. A lot of other hosts do, but I don't. The best way to support the program is to purchase one of my books. And they are not expensive. They're available at Amazon Books or at Barnes & Noble. You can get an ebook or soft cover, and you'll get something of value. I would argue, peace of my mind. Anyway, thanks for joining me, everyone. Peace to Ukraine. Let's pray for peace. Let's pray for peace in the world. And may God bless America. Thank you very much.